A query that has challenged me for a long time is the words in the Haggadah, Baruch HaMakom Baruch Hu. Blessed is the Omnipresent, and blessed is He. Baruch Shenosan Torah L'Am Yisrael Baruch Hu. Blessed is He who gave the Torah to the Jewish people, and blessed is He. And then it goes on to say, Keneged Arba Banim Dibre Torah. The Torah speaks about 4 sons or children. Echad Chacham, one is the Chacham, the wise one. One child is the Rasha, Vechad Rasha, the wicked one. Vechad Tam, one is the simple one. V'echad She'ene Yidei Elishal, and one that cannot ask. So first and foremost, why does the Haggadah use the terminology of Hamakom, which is the omnipresent? Why can't we simply say Baruch Hashem, blessed God, who gave us the Torah, and blessed God, who in His Torah talks about the 4 children? What is this concept of Hamakom? Furthermore, we read further in the Haggadah that it says, Baruch Shomer Haftachasar Yisrael. Blessed is He who keeps His promise to the Jewish people. Why? What was the promise that God gave or made to the Jewish people? Sha'akadosh Baruch Hu chishev es haketz lasois, etc., etc., etc. What is the promise that God promised to the Jewish people? It says that the Holy One, blessed be He, calculated the end of the bondage. In other words, He calculated the end of the bondage and He took us out of Egypt. And therefore we thank Him. We thank Him because He fulfilled His promise. He told Abraham He's going to put His children into a foreign country, a land they do not know. They're going to suffer there in slavery for 400 years, but we thank God that He fulfilled His promise and He took us out. Thank you very much. Yasher Koach. That's why we thank God. Maybe we should thank God for putting us in there in the first place. And thank God you took us out. And that's why we give God a big Yasher Koach. You know, you fulfilled your promise. Would God not fulfill His promise? If God expects us to fulfill our promise, then surely God would surely fulfill His promise. So what is the Haggadah making a big deal here? Blessed is He who keeps His promise to Israel, that He calculated the end of the bondage and He took us out. So to understand all of these things, number one, why is God called the Omnipresent? Why do we talk about the giving of the Torah? Why the 4 sons or children? And then why we say God keeps His promise. First and foremost, we have to understand the concept of Hamakom. Why do we call God by this funny name? God is the place, the omnipresent. It sounds better in Latin, you know, the omnipresent. So the Medrash tells us that God is called Hamakom. God is called by this appellation, thank you, because He is the place of the world, whereas the world is not His place. In other words, the world is contained in Him, but He is not contained in the world. So that is why God is called Hamakom. But there really needs to be a deeper understanding of why God is called the Omnipresent, the place. And that is, whenever we require a specific attribute of God, we call God by that name. In other words, when there is a time of war, we call God the God of peace. For we want God to come down and bring peace at a time of war. Or, more simply stated, we recite in the Amidah, God, you grace man with understanding, because you are the God of understanding. In other words, because we require this specific quality or this specific attribute, therefore we actualize that attribute that is found within God. And therefore we must say, being that we are starting the Haggadah after the 4 questions, and now the Father begins to answer the questions and begins to expound on the verses. He introduces these verses by saying, Baruch HaMakom, blessed be the Omnipresent, because this is the attribute that we are trying to elicit. This is the quality that we are trying to acquire. What does that mean? So the teaching of the Frierdiker Rebbe, that he says, what is the reason why we thank God for keeping His promise? Why would God not keep His promise? So he says that God has a tremendous tainug. God has tremendous pleasure when Jews are in exile. What does that mean? He wants to see us suffer? No, God forbid. But when God sees how a Jew in exile is living under dire situations, and things are not easy, and things are dark, and godliness is concealed, and yet the Jew gets up in the morning and he goes to daven, or on Yom Kippur, a man is working in his store and he closes the store a few hours early to go Yom Kippur afternoon and recite Ne'ilah in the shul together with the community. This gives God tremendous pleasure to see the love of a Yid in Gadlus, in exile. When the Jews are in Israel and when God is revealed and everything is perfect and everybody is rich and everybody is healthy and everybody is dandy and everybody is at peace, it's very easy to serve God. When is there a true divine test and a challenge for a Jew when things are not so easy? So God derives tremendous tainug, tremendous pleasure when a Yid in exile, in Egypt, serves God. This brings God the greatest pleasure. So says the Frierdiker Rebbe that this is what we thank God for in the Haggadah, even though we know that God derived so much pleasure from the service and the mitzvahs and the good deeds that the Jews did in Egypt, and technically He should have let the Jews stay a little longer to derive even more pleasure, yet God went against His own pleasure and He gave up His own joy to take a Jew out of exile, to take a Jew out of his pain. And this is the reason here, says the Rebbe, why we say Baruch HaMakom. Because God in His true essence, the way He is above nature, the way He is above world, He sees how advantageous it is for a soul to go through challenges. He sees how great it is for the soul to overcome these temptations. And God derives tremendous pleasure. And therefore we say, Baruch HaMakom. Blessed be God who's the Omnipresent. In other words, that God comes down, He withdraws from His holy place, from His throne, from the Kisei HaKavod. And Baruch means to come down, to draw down. He comes down, Baruch, to a place of Makom, to a place of time and space, so that he feels the pain of the Jewish people. He is empathetic towards our needs. And therefore we start off the whole Haggadah, which means we start off all of the analysis of the verses dealing with the Exodus and the redemption and the history of the Jewish people with these words, Baruch HaMokim. It's all about God coming down and feeling the needs and the pain of the Jewish people. Which answers a very practical question. If, God forbid, you have to go into a house of a mourner, when you go to the house of a mourner, we say, Hamokoy minachem eschem b'seich shar evei litzir Yerushalayim. May the Omnipresent console you amongst the mourners of Zion and Jerusalem. And here too we say Hamokoy. May the Omnipresent. Why the Omnipresent? Why can't we simply say God? Hashem yinachem eschem. Make it simple. What does omnipresent mean? You first have to explain to people what omnipresent is. Simply say God. God should console you. But the answer here is the same. That in essence, the way God is in heaven, the way God is in his Kisi HaKoved, in the world of souls, it's a very good thing. The soul is now in a good place. The soul no longer is suffering. The soul is together with all the tzaddikim, Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Leah. He's studying Torah together with Moses and Isaiah the prophet and Eliyahu Hanavi. He's in a good place. So technically there should be no crying, there should be no mourning. Especially if, God forbid, the soul was sick and the person was suffering for many months before he died. So now the person is out of his agony. Yet we come to the house of the mourner and we say, Hamokim menachem eschem. Even though in your place, in your throne, in your abode, Almighty God, you see the advantage of the soul returning to heaven, but down here we are suffering. Down here there are people who are mourning. Down here there are people that are in pain. And therefore, Hamokim, we call God to come down into this place of time and space so that he feels the human limitation and to feel the pain that the individual is suffering. And therefore we ask Hamokim yinachem eschem, that God, who is the Omnipresent, to console that person. From Hamokim, Baruch HaMokim, we go on to say, blessed he who gave the Torah to the Jewish people. Because Torah also is connected with stability. After the Jewish people received the Torah, they traveled for 40 years in the desert. When you travel, there's a lot of discomfort. When you schlep from one place to the other, there's toil, there's hardship, there's a schlepperai. It's not something which is easy to go from one place to the other. You can't keep your head straight, you're famished, you're running around all over the place. So therefore, not only do we acknowledge God as Hamokim, as the place that he feels our pain and therefore he takes us out of Egypt, but God gives us the Torah. The purpose of the Torah was to bring shalom to the world, to bring peace to the world, to bring stability to the world, and furthermore to bring menucha, rest to the world. It says in the Medrash, why did God create Shabbos? Because he saw that the world lacked rest, menucha, ba Shabbos ba menucha. So he created Shabbos so that the world should have rest. Now, we know that the Torah was given on Shabbos. As the Gemara says, everybody agrees the Torah was given on Shabbos. In other words, God made a deal with creation that I will create the world on the condition that the Jewish people will accept my Torah on Shabbos. So even though already on the seventh day of creation God brought about menucha, God brought about rest and tranquility to the world, however, it was on condition that the Jews will accept the Torah on Shabbos. And now that the Jews accepted the Torah on Shabbos, in the year 2448 on the Jewish calendar, so now that strengthened the first Shabbos of creation. And furthermore, the Zohar says God looked into the Torah and He created the world. So in other words, the whole concept of peace and tranquility in the world comes about from the Torah. And therefore, because of the fact that the Jews now needed to travel 42 different journeys, and as the Medrash says, this alludes to the travels of the exiles after the destruction of the Second Holy Temple. For 1900 years, the Jews are traveling from one country to another country to another country. What gave us the ability to have that stability? That even though we were traveling from place to place, yet in that place, to be there with our mind and soul, and to be able to study Torah with tranquility, and to have a yeshiva. A yeshiva means to sit in tranquility, yet we're running from place to place. This was the fact that God is Hamakom. God is the Omnipresent. And God gave us a Torah. And furthermore, not only did God give us a Torah, but He gave us 4 children. Echad Chacham, one is the wise, one is the Rasha, the wicked, one is the simpleton, and one that cannot even ask. There's a famous question, why do we say the word one before each of the 4 sons, or the 4 children? Echad Chacham, Echad Rasha, Echad Tam, Echad Shein Delisho. One is this, one is that. Simply say there are 4 children and list them. Chacham Kama, Rasha Kama, Tam Kama, Shein Delisho Kama. Why one is, or say 1 is the Chacham, 2 is the Rasha. Why 1, 1, 1, 1? So the answer is that each one of them has the Echad. Each one of them has the one God in them. In other words, to connect it to the theme of Hamokoy. What does it mean God is the omnipresent? Really, God wants to withdraw. He doesn't want to be part of the world. He doesn't want to deal with all this pain and mischief and suffering and tyranny and sickness. He would rather be in heaven, a machaya, it's quiet over there, it's peaceful. So therefore, by saying Baruch HaMokoim, we ask God to come down, to feel the pain, to help us in our dire straits, in our difficulties. And the same is true with the 4 children. Each child is different. We would rather deal only with the Chacham, only with the smart one, the good one, the perfect one. We don't want to deal with the Rasha. We don't want to deal with even the Tam or the Shein De'elisha, one that cannot ask. We got to start promoting him and exciting him and stimulating him and trying to get a question out of him or her. So we start with Baruch HaMokoim. We ask God to come down and feel our pain. And then we say, Baruch HaMokoim, that God, you gave us the Torah to help us with transition. And then we say, Baruch Hu, this God also gave us the strength to deal with our children. to deal with education, that we too should be able to move from one child to the other child, to deal with the same love that we give the chacham, the same love we give the smart child, we should give the same love to the wicked child. The same love we give to the simpleton is the same love that we give to the one that cannot ask. The echad, that same dedication. And perhaps even more than that. I heard a story that a rabbi had 5 sons. And 4 of them came out to be very good. Now one of them, not exactly the way he was expecting it to be. So, as the story goes, he was once at a yechidus with the Rebbe, and he asked the Rebbe, how come I have 5 sons, and I raised each one the same way, with the same love, the same devotion, I gave each one the same education, and yet 4 turned out okay, and 1 turned out not so okay. So the Rebbe said, the answer is in your question. You said you educated each one the same exact way. You can't educate each child the same way. Each child is different. And you have to give yourself over to each child in the way they need to be educated. As King Solomon tells us, educate a child according to his way. Each way is different. Each child is different. So the echad, the dedication you give to the chacham is different than the dedication you give to the rasha. The dedication you give to the rasha is different than the dedication you give to the tam. It's echad. It's complete dedication. But the approach must be different. Where do we derive this strength from? We derive it from the Torah. Because the Torah speaks about 4 children. The Torah means hira'ah. The word Torah means lesson. The Torah gives us the strength to be able to move and travel and have this transition from one child to the other, and yet to do it in a peaceful way. Because we derive our strength from Hamakom, God who's the Omnipresent. In other words, the world is not his place. Rather, he is the place of the world. He's in control of this transition. He does not allow the transition to take him over. And this perhaps is also the meaning, what it says in Kabbalah, that the word makom, if you add up the word makom, the gematria is 186. The letter kuf is 100, mem and mem is 40 and 40, which is 80, and the vav is 6, 186. 186 is the same gematria, as the name of God square. In other words, if you take the tetragrammaton, the yud and the hey, and the vav and the hey, so you do 10 times 10 is 100. 5 times 5 is 25. 6 times 6 is 36. 5 times 5 is 25. So the yud is 10, the hey is 5, the vav is 6, and the hey is 5. So the name of God, the tetragrammaton, square is 186. What does that mean? Square is really a terminology that is associated with space. How big is a room? If it's 5 by 5, then it's 25 square feet. So that the concept of space is primarily within this world. Beyond this world, there is no concept of time and space. Time and space is a creation. So therefore, why do we say that even though the Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, the Tetragrammaton, is a name of God that is associated with a place that is higher than time and space, But if a Jew is Baruch HaMakom, if a Jew blesses God, if a Jew has the strength to draw God down into time and space, how? By the fact that a Jew studies Torah, by the fact that a Jew does mitzvahs, he is oisin ritzoynei shel makom, he fulfills the will of the place, he fulfills the will of the omnipresent, he fulfills the will of God, then he has the ability to bring the power of God, which is beyond time and space, within time and space. And that's the ultimate objective. That within this world, which is a limited, finite place, a Jew and all the nations of the world should recognize that Baruch HaMakom, God is the master of the world. So this is the introduction to the Haggadah. Before we start to analyze the passages and talk about the history of the Jewish people, where we came from, our humble beginnings, and our blessed redemption, we start with praising God, and we say Baruch HaMakom, that it's all about God's sensitivity, and being that we must emulate God. Therefore, the way we study Torah, the way we perform a mitzvah, the way we connect with another person has to be also with this empathy, with this sensitivity, with this knowledge of how people are different and people have different needs. At the same time, to be able to react and to be able to treat and to be able to help each person on their level. And that is the meaning of Hillel, that which you despise, do not do unto others, and the rest is commentary. Because you have to be able to travel, you have to be able to feel the needs of another person, and to actualize, and to have this empathy for that person in his place. When you can do that, then you can truly be a leader, and you can truly be a teacher, and you truly emulate Torah, and then Baruch HaMakom, you are able to see God in everything that you do. So we hope and pray from this redemption, the redemption of Egypt, we will go to the ultimate Geula, the ultimate redemption with the coming of Mashiach speedily in our days.